Yes, my friends, welcome back to MTD CNC USA. I have a great surprise for you today. I'm honored to be a part of this conversation with you. A company that's been around since 1892. That's right, 1892. Incredible. They've started working with Factory Wiz for about 6 years. I'm with my buddy Mike, and we're going to learn a bit more about what Freeman does here with their molds, even though they started in the shoe industry in 1892, and learn a little bit about that evolution. But we're going to talk about Factory Wiz, the decisions that went into why it should be implemented, and moving into were those questions answered and what more came from Factory Wiz and utilizing Factory Wiz that maybe was unexpected. So Mike, thank you so much for being a part of MTD.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be part of it today. Looking forward to the conversation.
Me and you both, my friend. So to start, 6 years ago, let's go to 7 years ago, you knew that you needed to implement some sort of software to help you look at your machines, the employees going around, the uptime, the downtime, the scrap, being able to quote jobs. You knew you needed something. What led you in the direction of Factory Wiz?
Yep, you're right, all that stuff. So, you know, you always come out and you take a look at the machines and you see what's running and what's not running. You form opinions by what you see at that moment. And sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. And we were on the journey of spending a lot of money on investing in some new equipment, and we knew our utilization probably wasn't what it needed to be, and especially when you start throwing out $1 million or whatever it might be for another piece of equipment, that's kind of scary to start with. But if you're only running that piece of equipment 40%, 60%, whatever else it might be, we knew we really had to take a look at that and what were some of the reasons we were getting the runtime or lack thereof for our current equipment before we went ahead and bought something different.
I'm looking around your machine shop, and in my head I go, wow, these machines are massive. I'm looking at incredible Mitsui machines, knowing the parts that you guys make here, the big molds that you're making for the industry that you're in. To me, it's not just a want for a software like Factory Wiz, it's really a need, because you mentioned that uptime of the spindle, and to know what we call hidden machining or the hidden factory, the details behind what's going on, you have to know that, right? What is your average cycle time? You have to know this uptime of your machine, right?
Yeah, so interesting for us, it's all custom things like a lot of mold shops are. So average really doesn't exist, or a standard doesn't exist, I should say. So, you know, you're left to, okay, we're making a part for the first time every day almost, or every time we put something in. So we really need to understand, and the goal was to become more of a mold producer than a former, what you would think, a mold shop to be. So really what we're trying to do is we're investing in not only the equipment, but the people and the software up front to try and program the equipment so that when we turn it loose, it runs and runs unattended. You can see the big tool changers and the pallet changers on these big machines right here. You know, we do a lot of things to try and get that spindle to run, so we're making chips, which is how we make money at the end of the day. So we really need to understand what's the impediment or what's keeping us from making those chips. That's why we went and looked at monitoring software and landed with Factory Wiz, because it gives us the reasons why we're not making chips. It might be because of a bad program, lack of material, maybe no work, or oftentimes it comes down to there's just not manpower there to do it. The beauty of it is we're not making an assumption, and it's not based on myself or one of the other leaders or managers walking out here and saying, it's not running right now, somebody must be doing something wrong. Oftentimes that's not really the case. It's the situation, it's somebody upstream, it's that we don't have a person available to actually run the machine, and the data makes in making additional investments or focus on efforts on things really easy, because if we're losing a lot of runtime because we don't have a person per se, the thing to do is if the data makes sense, we hire the person and then we look to the data to change, that's no longer the reason it's not running, it's something else. And then we just keep rolling through the list and improving upon those until we work it down and bring the uptime up.
If I'm gathering this information from you correctly, Mike, it's really taken a lot of that guesswork we used to do out of the equation, a lot of the assumptions we used to do out of the, we assume it's running. We assume that it took this amount of setup time. But now Factory Wiz is kind of making that data as close to perfect as we can get to understanding where the machines are, where the people are, where that lights out is. My question is, you had expectations going into it. You talked to a sales guy. Obviously, they're going to tell you many of the things that you want to hear, but I know the Factory Wiz guys also aren't going to go to a place and try to do something that they can't do. So in many cases, and in all cases, here, they say, this is what we can do for you. This is what we expect to happen. Here's what you're able to accomplish. So my question to you is, from the expectations that you had coming in to what you've had in the results over 6 years, did all the expectations come to pass? And was there anything that was even more influential, that was unexpected, that you found to be a benefit here at Freeman?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I would say that we looked into this for quite some time on the front end. We looked at a lot of different products. Really, we try and stay on the cutting edge of things. So I would say if we've had it 6 years, we probably started kind of snooping around and looking into it maybe 9 years ago into different products or whatever. Got serious about it maybe 7 years ago or whatnot. And as we looked into other products and things available out in the market, you always have the things that are from some of the machine OEMs and things like that, but it kind of ties your hands because we've got a lot of legacy equipment in here that maybe isn't brand A or brand B or whatnot. So we came to a pretty quick conclusion that we almost needed it to be sort of an unattached third party. And again, saw Factory Wiz at IMTS, and over the years had Rich come in, Dominic come in, even back to John's days, come in and talk to us. And we really were sold on this is the way to do things, but it may be a little bit timid on the front end of saying, it's a decent investment, but how will the payoff work and whatnot, and things like that, opposed to gut feel. We're growing, we're becoming a bigger company. You just can't operate like that anymore. And I would say from the standpoint of what they've delivered, it was everything that they said they would. There's certain things we ask about, and some of the things I did like is from a sales standpoint, Rich is very well versed in it and kind of the architect of it or whatnot. And he wasn't afraid to tell us, yeah, no, it won't do that. Or we can do that, but, and that's important. There's been times you get from a salesperson standpoint, the answer is yes, and everything's rosy and we can do anything you want it to do. And then you get the product and it's a different story. Definitely wasn't the case with Factory Wiz.
My job when we do these interviews is to always have an authentic conversation. And when things get brought up, I always want to know more. And I place myself in a position of what would the viewer want to hear? And I didn't expect to ask this question I'm about to ask you, but you brought it up. And I think it makes sense to kind of open that conversation a little bit more. We don't need to spend a lot more time on it, but you mentioned you have a legacy shop here. You've been around since 1892. I see a bunch of different machines as I look around. You mentioned the universal capabilities of Factory Wiz, being able to communicate with most, if not all, of your machines. And there's a lot of options out there, but some of them are quite limited in what and where and how they can communicate, right? Factory Wiz allows you to communicate with the shop floor as a whole, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, you see the monitors, so that's a big thing. We put those in right from the beginning. Certainly was a key thing that, the guys, people are somewhat competitive by nature. So when you see different shifts up here or what the goal is, the guys will kind of, work back and forth on that a little bit to see who can beat who. The other end of it, from the standpoint of what you can connect it to, anything from the most advanced high-end piece of equipment to the reality of it is if you wanted to hook it up to a drill press and monitor, when the guy pulled the handle and when the drill was cutting or not, you might have to put some sensors on it or some things like that, but they could very easily do that and adapt it to something like that without any problem. We haven't done that. We focus more on the machine end of it or whatnot, but yeah, certainly we've been able to connect it to anything we want, and some of it is simply plug and play, and with the older things you have to go in and do a little bit more of a connection, but it's been, again, very easy on that. They send somebody in, we do a little bit of testing, and the next thing you know, we're off and running and we're getting good information from any machine we select in the shop.
Mike, you make my job really easy. You convey such a powerful message. I know the audience is super grateful for that, but I also know you're a busy guy, so I won't keep you here forever because I could literally talk to you for the entire day, but we won't do that. So the last thing I want to ask you before we go back to our regular scheduled programs is, you've been with Factory Wiz a little over 6 years now, so obviously you've had enough time to get to know the people, the ownership, the sales guys, the service team. Throughout that longevity of that 6+ years now, what's the service and support been like throughout that time?
No, it's been great, and I think it goes back and forth. You know, I mentioned before, we've had a really good relationship with all the guys at Factory Wiz. We've done some recommendations and some referrals and things like that they've sent people in to see the shop. And that, to me, that's the best testament in terms of how happy we are with it. We wouldn't open the doors to people to come in and see it or spend our time trying to help promote it if we didn't think it was a really good thing for us. And we've had the great fortune being in business that other people have done the same thing for us and opened their doors up and shown us things that have helped them improve. So we feel a little bit of obligation to the industry to do the same thing. And again, we wouldn't recommend something that we weren't happy with.
Well, guys, this is Mike. He's an amazing person. This is Freeman, an incredible company, 1892. Mike, here at MTD, we wish you another 130 years or more of continued success. Keep up the good work, and thank you so much for sharing this story with our global audience.
It's been a pleasure.